Hey guys, thanks for joining me on another Zoho Analytics tutorial. In this video, this is one of my favorite things to teach and show people. It is the pivot view. And I like it so much because it is super integral in showing very detailed calculations and all sorts of other things in your dashboards. It makes it really meaningful. So here I have a sales table. So you can see it has just an ID, the sale ID, the dollar amount, a customer ID that purchased whatever that item was, the date it was purchased, and then this is just looks like an empty extra column here. So in order to create our first pivot view, we're going to come up here to the Create button, and then you can see all the different charts that we're able to create. So we can go chart view, which is all sorts of bar charts, graphs, and line charts, things like that. Pivot view, summary view, and tabular view. So we are going to click into pivot view. It's going to ask me which table do I want to use. And since I'm already here on the sales table, that's what it defaults to. So I'm going to hit OK. Perfect. Now this comes up with, on this left-hand side, you can see our table name listed right up here along the top, along with all of our usable columns. Now, I have many different options of where I can take these, and as you can see, you can either click this little box along the side, or it comes up with the 4 little arrows, and I can drag and drop anywhere I want. So one of my favorite things and first things that I do in a data set is I make sure that there are no duplicates. I make sure it's pretty clean before I try to create any sort of chart and present it in any sort of meaningful way. So on our table, we can see that we have some duplicate dates, which is totally fine, understandable in sales. We have, looks like mostly unique IDs here. But just to check, I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to say, let's grab the ID. I'm going to throw into the rows column, and it will bring up actual. We'll actually go over this in just a second on actual versus dimensional. And so I'll leave that there. And then what I want to do is actually count the IDs, how many times each ID is listed, and that will tell me if I have a duplicate in there. So I'm going to grab the same column, and I'll throw into the data. And I'll hit generate, and you can see what it does here. So now this didn't do what exactly we wanted to do, but just as a first off view of it, you can see that the actual here of ID gives us little ranges. So that can be helpful in some cases, but in our case, we wanted to count which IDs were duplicated. So I'm going to go ahead and say treat as a text and click dimension. All right, we'll reload it. And now here's what we wanted. On this side at least, it gives us every single one of our IDs in descending order. And on the right hand side, it gives us the count. Wait, no it doesn't. Over here, you can see it says it's summing it up. So if we give that a click, it's going to show you all these different options you have to calculate the number you dropped in here. For our example, it's the ID. So we can do the sum, max, min, variance, count, distinct count. What we want to do is the count, just to count every single number in there to see if there's any duplicates. Once I regenerate that, it will load up and say how many right here. So it looks like on IDs, oh look at that, we do have a duplicate in this data set. So what we can do now is actually just either click on the number here or this number. Either one will pull up the same amount. And so we can see, okay, it looks like it put in 2 of the same ID for the same amount, but different customers. So then we can go back and say, well, why is that? Because this should be a primary key, which means it has to be unique. And so something went wrong. This is impossible. So we need to go back and fix that. So that is a way you can figure out if there's duplicates while you're cleaning your data before you even get to presenting. Because you definitely don't want to have incorrect data or duplicated stuff while you're presenting, especially to an executive team. makes your team look bad, makes you look bad, and then they will stop trusting your information. One last little piece, as you saw, I kind of went down manually and looked at everything, saw, oh, everything's ones, oh, there's a 2. A better way to do that is if we come up here, you can actually see there's already an arrow right here. But on any one of the columns in these charts, you can come over here and just click the arrow. And you see, now it took that one away and put it over here. It means it's sorting this ascending. If I click it here again, it will sort by descending. So then we can just see the highest number at the top and go on down through there. Now, to give you just a little taste of the more detailed and in-depth things that you can do with a simple pivot view, I'm going to go ahead and clear these out. So I'll hit the X again, and now it's all clean. I'm going to be able to take any one of these, throw them wherever I want to create whatever type of chart I want. So now I'm going to say, let's see, how about, let's do the amount, sum of the amount, and then I want to see it maybe over a date. But instead of putting it in rows, and actually we'll do this, and I'll just go full date, you can see that the rows, as we saw in our last chart, they go top to bottom, so up and down. If I throw this into columns, it's going to go left to right. So depending on how you want your chart to look, you can throw it in columns, rows, mix and match. If I throw in customers like this, and just say treat as a text again, there you go. Now you can see all sorts of pivot charts. So customer ID here, date here, $12. What I'm going to do right now, though, is say, okay, just give me the date and the amount. Now, it's loaded up here, and what I'm actually going to say is, instead of summing this up, let's go a little more detailed and say, let's see the difference. So the sum, I can stay at the sum, and as you see, if I scroll, if I hover down these, you can see these all stay the same, because you can do that running totals, you can do percent of rows, you can do difference from, all sorts of different things with every one of these calculations. So I'll stick to sum for now, and then what I'm going to say is, let's see after each day, what is the percent difference from my previous day? So let's say percent of previous value, and the only option I have is what I put here in the column. So I'm going to click full date, and now when I generate this, it's going to be from the previous day, what percentage of that day am I in today's sales? So if that's confusing, it's probably because I said it confusing. But for example, you can see, and what I'm actually going to do is show the amount here too. So this amount, you see on the January 2nd, there's $10 worth. So that means 100%, since there's not a previous day. On the 3rd, it's going to say what percent of yesterday's sales are we at today. So we have $15 we sold. So 15 divided by 10, that's going to give us 150%. So we've sold $5 more, that's 150% of yesterday. And you can go on through and look, how are we doing on each of these days? So for example, I'm going to go here. I'll just take that out so it makes it a little more compact. If I wanted to add a filter, say I only want to see the 2nd through, how about the 14th? We'll go with that. I'm going to come up here and say, okay, filter tab. I only want to filter on certain dates, so I'm going to grab it, drag it, drop it. Now, I love this filtering because there's so many different options and ways you can filter. So what we want to do is, we only wanted the 2nd through the 14th. So I'm going to go, okay, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 6th, 12th, 14th. Now it says include items. I'll generate it, and that's all it's going to show me. Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. So we did great. We sold more there. Then we didn't sell as much, so we went down. Then we killed it again, really killed it, and we almost, about had it the same. One thing we can do in the filters, say, okay, I've seen all these days, now I want to see the opposite. I don't want to see these days. Instead of unclicking all these and clicking the rest of them, all you have to do is come right here and exclude. Now when I generate it, it's going to give me all the other days. So now you can see it doesn't take into account anything before the 15th, and it only shows the 15th on. That is a super easy way to be able to filter and not have to be checking so many different boxes all the time. Now, let's take this filter out, and I'll show you it just reverts back to date and amount. Now, what if I wanted to go here? Oh, excuse me. Now, if I want to say customer ID in rows, and I'm very partial to using rows instead of columns, usually because it's easier to scroll down to see my information instead of scrolling over. So I'm going to say treat it as text so I can see all the numbers, and I want to see spending, maybe, by those people. And let's go ahead and sort it in descending order so I can see who spends the most. Okay, perfect. So we see these customers and we see these amounts. So what I can do is say, all right, I know I want to look just at one customer. So let's go into our filters. I'm going to grab a customer ID. I just want to look at customer number 36. But maybe I also want to look at, so maybe I just want to look at customer 36, or, you know, maybe I want to look at a range of customers. Since we've already seen how we can just click the boxes, that's one way to filter. If I want to see in between a range, it's really simple. We can just click ranges, and then I will be able to go ahead and create a custom range. So it will give me a few examples like this from the data here, but I'm going to say maybe I just want to see anything above 50. So you'll see it will do 50 and above. So it's going to include that. So if I go there, okay, look at that. If the customer ID is important, well, that's great. That's how we filtered it on range. But you can use ranges in dates. You can use ranges in dollar amounts, who's spent a certain amount. You can do all sorts of different things with that. But here we have our range, and then we have how much each of those customers spent. Now, one thing I like to do, so I'm going to go ahead and clear this, and actually I'm going to clear this filter. So now when we hit this, generate, we see all of our customers, we see their total amounts. Now what I like to do is in the filters, I'm going to say amount, and it give me the sum, and now it's going to bring up my options over here. And so when we do this, I'm going to say, I'm really only worried about who is spending the most. How can I figure that out? So I'm going to come over here and say top percent. Most of the time in data sources, we're going to have thousands and thousands of rows and columns that tell us all sorts of different customers and sales. So the top percentage is going to be better to use than just a top and bottom number, so that we can see the top 5%, top 10%. And so what I'm going to do is hit top 10%, or excuse me, top 5%. So now I'm going to say, oh, look at that. One customer makes up the top 5%. Let's change it to 10. Oh, only 2 of all of our customers make up our top 10%. Now let's look at bottom. Bottom 10%. Only 2 customers make up our bottom 10%. So we can see there's a lot in the middle there. So that is another way you can filter and use pivot views to be able to find out little nuggets of data that you'll be able to pass on to your stakeholders so that they can make better marketing campaigns or better decisions overall when they're finding people to sell to. Okay, I've gone ahead and cleared out the whole entire chart and named it Sales Analytic so that we can show the very last piece. We've gone through how to drop, drag and drop, what it's going to do. We've gone through the filters. These are what I consider hard filters. So only us as the builder can change these, and no matter what user filters are used on top of those, these filters will always stay in place unless we as the builder go back in and change them. Now, user filters are very nice to have and very interesting. So most of the time, if you are building a dashboard for somebody, you're going to have dashboard filters. And those are cool because they filter every single chart on the whole dashboard, and it's really nice and seamless. If for some reason you have an ad hoc report, or someone just wants to see one pivot view of something, these user filters are really nice because it puts the filters right on the chart, and they'll be able to change whatever they need to. Now, I like this best because I don't have to go back and forth with them 100 different times, changing my hard set filters to be able to show them what they need to see. So let's look at an example. If I go, we'll go customer ID, let's change it to dimension so it shows us all their actual IDs. We'll drop the amount in there, sum it up, and so now it's going to show us the customer IDs, the total amounts. If I put in a hard filter, as in date, maybe, I'm going to say we have to have, we can have the range anything from the time period of 2nd of January 2022. We don't want anything before that, so I'll add that in there. It's not going to do anything to our information, but we can have that in there as a hard filter just for an example. Now, if I go to user filters, this is where I can give the user the ability to change my chart without permanently changing it. It's just temporary filters for them to see what they need to see. So one important one that I almost always do is date, so they can look in the past, sometimes in the future, if that's possible with your information. And then maybe, actually, let's do customer ID, or we'll just do item ID. I like that one. Now you can see these have popped up. These are user filters only. One option we have is coming in here. We can remove them, expand them, which I never use, and then we can edit them. Now we can change the display name, so instead of date, if you wanted to write something else, that's fine for me, so I'm going to leave it. There's this choose component type, which is date range selector, and you can change that to be any one of these. So if you want an actual period, you can say exactly what you want to show them. You can say a relative period, so yesterday, today, last 30 days. I use these constantly in almost every single chart because it's really an easy way for them to see what they want to see. Or you can do a seasonal period. So you can do the quarters or weeks, hours, days, months, anything like that. The one thing I would say is that most of the time I keep it at date range selector so they can just select whatever dates they want. If you do happen to use a relative period, I would make sure that this, and let me box it here, this box that's boxed should stay single select box. I say that because it gives you the option to do multi-select, and when you go and say, okay, I'll allow my user to select today, maybe yesterday, maybe they use the last 7 days, last 30 days. If I allow them to do multiple, they might accidentally click yesterday and then go, okay, well, I actually want to see the last 7 days. They might click that one too and then go, well, maybe just today, and click that one and forget they have already clicked these other ones. Those are going to confuse each other, and it might show incorrect information because the filters are confused. So I would suggest, if you're going to give them the options of using relative time period, to keep it as the single select box. So now I'll go ahead and leave that there. Now you can see on the IDs, it has brought up this slider bar, which is kind of cool for some things, but if you have huge ranges, huge variation in your numbers, even right here, 0 to 100, I'm going to have to be very, very particular in just how far I drag it to only get the range I want in IDs. And so what we can do is come in here and edit it. And it says component type double slider. Yeah, I hate the double slider. So I'm going to do multi-select box, and that's going to allow them to choose just the ones they want. Now let's go ahead and click OK, generate it, hit save to save the changes, and I'm going to hit view mode over here. Now view mode allows me to see it exactly how my user is going to be seeing it and using it. So we have up here in the top, we have our two filters we just added in. Easy enough, pop right up. If I want to go to my date, there we go. It only allows us to select one. You can see there's no checkboxes, so we can only select one at a time. And it gives us only the options that we are allowing our user to select. So I'm going to say, let's see, maybe last 30 days. Okay, it looks like we only have one sale, one customer ID. So there could be multiple sales under that customer ID that make the sum of 100, or it could just be one person with one item. The important part I want to show here is that we change this ID to be relative. So if I say last 30 days, there's only going to be one person, and you can see that this is not relative actually. It's allowing us to select every single one. So that's our ID for that customer. If I select maybe 13, it's going to show nothing. That is because in the last 30 days, ID 13 did not exist. That was on a different day. So to be able to clear up the confusion for that, I love to come in here and select right down here. Always list all values. That's what it gave us, and that can lead us to what we just saw as incorrect information because we clicked on an incorrect filter. I'm going to say list only the relevant values. Okay, go ahead and save that. I'm going to generate it and view again just like our user would view. Now that I do this, I can go back and say last 30 days again, and I'm going to say, oh, looks like the only option I have is ID 100 because that's the only one that happened in those 30 days. Now if I go ahead and say, let's do, looks like you can do others. Here it's going to give me everything. If I wanted a different time period like today, oh, there's no sales today, so it shouldn't show me anything. Perfect, no results. Now, that's one of my favorite things with user filters. It allows us to keep things clean. Our users can still see what they want without bugging us too much, since we've already gone through all the time of talking with them, designing, building, fixing, and this keeps it clean for all of us to see. Now, there is a lot more going on that we can do right up here in these buttons. Also, there's stuff in these buttons here that we can do, and especially these extra settings back here. Make sure you go and look at that other video because there's so many different things you can do, especially here in the settings button. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you know how to create your pivot views now and be able to do simple ones, get more in depth a little bit. The best thing you can do is play around with it. There's no permanent anything you can do here. You can always take off your columns, filters, change them up. So make sure you play around with it. Thanks as always, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe so you get all those notifications. And for these upcoming videos, I'm going to keep going with the charts. So make sure you look for those too.